Hello, and welcome to MFM Reaper. These are the most overlooked and most important things to consider when buying a Midi controller to control effects. Hardware EQ always had lots of knobs and dials and switches. Many software EQs are emulations of hardware. But, being as it's software, other features are often added to an original design. As well as the increase in complexity, software also gave us the visual display. Most engineers will tell you, use your ears and don't use a visual reference. And most engineers, if the plugin's got it, will use a visual reference, so you work that out. Some plugins are a bit hard to manage visually. None of this actually matters if you're using a MIDI controller. So to control all these plugins identically, what do we need from the MIDI controller? Most parametric EQs have a high pass, low pass, and 5 central frequencies: the low, low-mid frequency, mid, high mid, and high. I've assigned this row to control the frequencies: high pass, low, low mid, mid, high, and then low pass. Then you've got the cues for the respective channels. The final set of rotaries or faders you'll need to control an EQ are the gains. You don't need a fader for gain on the high pass or low pass, there's only the frequency and cue feature. So over to the right, that's low frequency being boosted and reduced, then low mid, high mid, and then high. The display on the controller clearly tells me what parameters I'm changing. You can adjust all the text in an editor on the computer. The template uploads to the controller, then save. Most EQs will let you switch each individual frequency on and off. This one only starts at low frequency, so I've put those in the correct places. The slick EQ only has 3 bell filters: low, mid, and high. No high mid or low mid. I chose 5 other very different looking EQs to use this one template with. However different the plugins look, the template remains the same. Some of these EQ plugins have quite unique features. On the Hybrid V2, I was able to assign an extra notch filter to an XY touchpad on the controller. So we've still got 2 rotaries on the left hand side and 3 faders on the right hand side, free for use, as well as quite a few buttons. The slick EQ looks very different to the Hybrid, but the layout on the controller is exactly the same. Because there are only 3 adjustable bell curves, the low, mid and high, the low mid controller remains blank, as does the high mid. So the plugins fit to the template of the controller rather than trying to make a template for each plugin. The last 3 faders always have mix, input and output. The plugin itself didn't have a mix, so I used Reaper's own mix control up at the top there. As well as rotaries and faders, you need quite a lot of buttons to control plugins too. Auto gain, link, bypass, MS. All of these features are on many of the EQ plugins and easily controlled from buttons. These 2 rotaries are still unassigned. I've only used 7 pairs so far. So I always have drive on this, width above it, and then I have a stepped button above that to go through any modes that the EQ might have. The row of 8 pads on the left hand side control things like presets up and down. And there's a button for less information from the plugin. The tilt filter on this plugin is controlled by the now empty high-mid frequency controls. That includes an on-off, a cue, and a shape button. Unfortunately, I seem to have got quite engrossed with that feature. At the moment, I've got the plugins open in what's called the effects chain window. You can also view these as floating effects. They work differently. As with a lot of these larger EQ plugins, there are far too many parameters to control. However, most of them also have a link feature. This works fine if you just want to EQ the left and right, or the mid and side, the same. Though you could, after EQing, unlink and make the adjustments to the left-hand side, or what would be the mid. You could program this the other way around, so the right-hand side was what was in control when they unlinked. Gain scale's a useful feature to reduce and even invert your EQ. The Mag EQ is probably one of the simpler plugins. They're all gains. So they're assigned to the 5 gains, and then the filters at the top and at the bottom are assigned to the frequencies. There's a confusing amount of bypasses in Reaper. I don't use bypasses on the actual plugins. This is almost the purpose of using a controller. Small, pain in the arse things to get with the mouse. Get them onto a controller. It just makes things easier and more consistent to manage. Even plugins like this are controlled by the same template, everything in the same position. I actually hated using this plugin with the mouse. Now I actually enjoy using it with the controller. A lot of people like to use controllers because they're tactile. The strongest feature for me is the fact I know where everything is. When you know exactly where a parameter on the controller is, because it's consistently in the same place, I think it's the most overlooked and under-talked about benefit of using a controller. Often the controller isn't being used in this way, and more often than not that's because the controller doesn't have enough controllers to control the plugin. When you become a bit more confident about the positions of the parameters on the controller, you can start to do more than one thing at once. Working like this can quickly let you hear things you wouldn't hear just moving one feature at a time with the mouse. Many plugins also have hidden menus. Once a controller is assigned to a parameter, it won't matter if that hidden menu is visible or not. The input and the output and the auto gain are still going to be controlled when that window isn't open. The range of the fader on the SL25 controlling any plugin will always control its maximum, in this case plus 24 and minus 24 dB, but I tend to use this plugin for mastering. When I lower the wet dry mix, I can easily get this down to 1 dB or less for the full range of the fader. It's easy to calibrate the range by pushing one of the gain faders to full and bringing the wet dry mix down. So that's now about 3-4 dB in maximum range. Using this technique, you can get very, very subtle EQ. Certainly more subtle than I'll need. Saturation or drive are common on EQ plugins too. So although I'm swapping between one plugin and another, it's still in the same position on the controller. A closer look now at Reaper windows. If I toggle open the effects chain window, I can go up and down the effects with the reverse and forward, or with the up and down on the keyboard. And I can toggle that shut again with the same button. All the same plugins on that channel will open as floating windows with F on the keyboard. The loop button on the controller toggles the focus of each of these floating windows so the controller can be applied straight to that. It can be a bit messy on the screen and take up a lot of space. The set of actions assigned to the toggle button on the controller actually do a little bit more than just open the effects chain window. It'll also close any floating windows. You can assign a hotkey to swap the focus from the effects chain window to the arrange window. This way, the hotkey commands still work in the arrange page and you're still able to view the effects chain window. Let's find the shortcut that I use for that. So it's focus main window. Search for that in the filter focus main window. And if you use a hotkey, use a modifier and use option. For some reason that works better swapping between windows. I don't know why. Besides the actual plugin parameters, it's also useful to be able to control selecting which plugin on a channel. This button selects the next channel, automatically opens the plugin. I can change the presets. Automatically closes the plugin and selects the next channel, and so on. This is so I can stay on the controller working across tracks just using plugins. If I use the up and down arrow on the keyboard, this will also go up and down the channels, but it won't open and close the plugins. I can still select floating plugins from hotkeys and the effects chain window from hotkeys. It doesn't matter which window is focused when I'm using the controller. For example, I can bypass the individual plugin here, but without changing focus, I can bypass the whole track there. The hotkeys would still be focused on the effects chain window. I chose EQs for the first demonstration because EQs have actually some of the most parameters. So to control an EQ plugin, you're going to need 24 rotaries or faders or a combination thereof, quite a few buttons, and obviously you can assign, if you've got enough buttons, a set of them to do something outside of just controlling the plugin, which all helps you stay on the controller to control the plugin. On top of this, the Remote SL also has 25 keys. I've got 2 of these now, and I've got a 0, which is the same thing but without the keys, and they've cost me between £40 and £80. I've not found another controller with this many controllers for that kind of money. The controller works directly to Reaper's plugins without any third-party software. If you want to learn how to do this, please look at my other videos and please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.